Hey, how's it going? Subscribe for a high five. Okay, what are we talking about today? There's no forgiveness from the regressed lady. Um, you know, I'll give it like a 7, but I want to say there are two main, huge elements of the series, right? Um, her brother sucks. Like, he's just awful. Worst brother, period. Um, and the main villain is petty. Those are two key elements that I want to just throw out there off the bat in case you're wondering. Um, but yeah, I don't know, whatever. Let's just get into it. What's the deal? Um, so basically, the main character here regresses, right? She goes back in time to prior, you know, for like death and all of her family going to ruin and things like that. So the reason her family goes to ruin, right? They have like this like artifact. I don't know. It's just like a little gem or whatever that gives, basically like luck and special abilities, all these different elements and power to whoever is its master, right? And in the original, her brother, like I mentioned before, who's, a dickhead. So the brother, right, he yoinks the gem from his family and gives it to the villain, who is her best friend. Um, Obviously this is not ideal. This is, screws everything up. She ends up getting, messed up. Her family falls apart. Everyone's dying, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, she dies. And then that's where this whole story starts. When she does come back, she's like, okay, well, I need to stop that. And I also want to get revenge, right, on the villain. And to be honest, that is the gist of the story. So basically, she's trying to get revenge. And there are two, well, there's a lot of important characters, but I would say the ones you have to focus on. This is the Duke, who I think you can tell by this is kind of, there's a little chemistry going on there, right? Like, whoa, little sweethearts. Basically in the original one, her family was kind of brought down with him because he tried to like rebel against the Empire or whatever. And then, they were both taken down, both families. And in this life, it's kind of like, oh, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. She kind of realizes, well, okay, he doesn't like, that villainess. He doesn't like the head of the Mage Tower. Who, by the way, the Mage Tower, of course, wants that relic because it amplifies abilities and everything, so they're kind of a big deal. But basically, the Duke, right, doesn't like the villainess or the Mage Tower. So it's kind of like, well, he's a pretty solid choice. And then they end up kind of liking each other because they have a lot of similar interests and, aspects to them. So he's one of the major characters. They're other characters. I mean, there is like a king and a queen and the prince, things like that. She was, together with the prince, like fiancés and whatnot. But he kind of ends up being irrelevant. It's kind of just like, in this life she shows that she doesn't care about him anymore, then he ends up trying to be clingy and kind of basic in terms of characters. He doesn't really do a ton. Basically just like, whenever things are going poorly for her and he tries to like, say something that would be rude to her, in this life she ends up just clapping back and saying like, you're a dickhead. The prince ends up just kind of being like, oh, I can't believe she's so different now. Oh. Not really anything special. the king and the queen are kind of set up to be corrupt, but it's pretty obvious. But they also don't really play that big of a role. I would say, like, the main focal points, you know, would be the villainess. To a certain degree, her brother. He's basically just like a major part in how everything goes poorly. And then the head of the mage tower. As far as like quality with any of these characters, I mean, the brother's just annoying. She like tells him, hey, the villain, you know, this villainess is a bad person. And, you know, she's constantly doing bad things, and, you know, the main character's screwing her over and everything, but then the brother still tries to, you know, woo her and follow her and things like that, and he even gives away this family heirloom to this villain. And I'm like, what is your problem? She constantly tells you this person's bad. But then he's like, nah, I don't trust it. And he ends up just falling into her hands repeatedly, and he falls in love at like first sight. Because there's multiple characters in the series that he just instantly falls in love with the second he sees them. And you're just like, this character is brain dead. I don't know what's wrong with them. In terms of the villainess, okay, I mentioned this at the start, but she is so petty. Her reasoning for not liking the main character. Okay. The reason the villain doesn't like the main character is when she was younger, right? And the you know, the main character is this noble, and the villain is kind of like a she's basically like an illegitimate child, right? So she's just wandering around the streets, and the main character sees her, right? And is like, hey, you know, I'll give you some bread or food, because she looked, you know, like she was in a bad situation, and I forget, she like bumped into another character, and the main character was just trying to be nice because, you know, she was in a tough spot, and they just happened to meet each other. And then this villain, rather than getting mad at the person that bumped into her or the people that insulted her, she gets mad at the main character because she pitied her. And this is like a lifelong grudge. Like, this happened when they were like, I don't even know, like 10, and right now they're like, who knows, like 20? And for some reason this grudge is just held for all these years, and all it is, she just pitied her one time. Like, it's literally one time she did something like this, and the villain is so fixated on this one moment, and she's like, I hate the main character now, she should die. And it's like, what kind of crazy grudge? Like, she offered you free food, and now you want to kill her. It's like, what? But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty basic. Just main character goes back in time, and they want to stop everything from going to shit. I guess I'll do the old SAE. What is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. Story-wise, you know, it's just frustrating. Like, the main character is illogical. Not the main character. The main character's brother is illogical, and the villain is illogical. So I feel like the story's not really that well written. But it's not like super bad in a lot of other areas, so I'll give it a 5. Art-wise, 7. Like, it's quality art, just not special. Enjoyment-wise, you know, those moments are kind of bad, but they're also kind of funny thinking about it afterwards, so I'm gonna give it a 7. So we're looking at about, you know, a 7, potentially a 6, depending on your beliefs. Which, you know, overall, like, how would I word that? Well, like, the story is a little rough. Objectively speaking, it's not very high quality. The art, it's pretty basic, but it's well done. Enjoyment-wise, I mean, it's funny. If you really think about it, it's pretty freaking funny, so I'll give it a 7. Overall, yeah, like, we're looking at a 6 or a 7. It's decent, but not mind-blowing. You know, it's not going to, be your favorite story anytime soon. It's just, you know, it's a fun little side read. Wouldn't go out of your way, but if you see it, I think, you know, it's not a bad call to read. But, yeah, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Maybe leave another story you want me to read down below, even if I've read it or read it again. And, yeah. See ya.